Well, thank you so much if you're streaming me at home. I appreciate it. So everybody can hear me? Everybody's good? And I'm by nature kind of loud, so sorry about that. So really, thanks again for coming out. This is hopefully going to be a very helpful presentation if you are brand new to the area and you haven't had a hurricane season yet. We will be talking about storms from the past. We will be talking about Hurricane Irma. We will be talking about Michael, Dorian, as well as what we had during the 2020 hurricane season, and also what the outlook is right now shaping up for this year. Okay, so a little bit about me. Born and raised in Florida, Penn State meteorology. I was, I made the decision when I was about 18. I was like, at that point, I had always lived in southern Florida. I had always lived in South Texas, and I wanted to make the move to Penn State, go through the cold, go through the snow, but I did that because of the fact that it is one of the best meteorology programs in the country. I agree, thank you, sir. And I did that because the reputation. It was a fantastic school. I had great professors, and I was able to get my meteorology degree there. And then I made the fantastic trek across the country. And how TV works is you actually have to start off small in markets in Oklahoma and North Texas, and that's what I did. I started out in Tornado Alley, did that for about a year, and then after that did a year in Arkansas, then Savannah, Georgia for 3.5 years, and then now I have been at Wink for 5.5 years, and it has been fantastic. When I first got to Wink, it was a morning job, and with the morning job, you basically get up at 1:45 a.m., yeah, when the alarm goes off, it's like the most piercing sound. It's like, oh, God. Oh. So I would normally get up at 1:45. I'd be at work at 3. Show starts at 4:30, and it's every 10 minutes, but everything's flip-flop. So when you guys are having breakfast, I'm having lunch. When you guys are having lunch, I'm having dinner. And then when you're having dinner, I'm actually going to bed. So, but it was essentially the price of admission to do what I love. And this is something that I have always loved. It's the only thing that's kind of ever made sense. I've loved weather since I was a kid, since I was 7 years old. And I get to do a dream every single day. And not only do I get to do what I love, and this is what the entire presentation is about, my job is to keep you guys safe for all types of weather. Now, we obviously hope that we never have to deal with a tropical system, but my job is to protect you just in case we do. Okay, so again, I've been doing this for 5.5 years, and recently, as of just 3 months ago, Jim Farrow, who's been in this area for, at least at Wink specifically, for 29 years, he's 66 years old, was saying, hey, he actually has a newborn. Yeah, he's got enough on his plate. So he made the decision that, hey, it's been fantastic, it's been wonderful, but I want to start living. He's not 26 years old, he's 66 years old, and I don't blame him one bit, and wanted to make the decision to retire. That's when I got called in, and management said, hey, what do you think of Chief? And I said, well, that's big shoes to fill, but I said absolutely. And the tone won't change though in the years ahead. Jim's reputation was, this is how he was in person if you've ever met him. It's essentially no extra business. I was going to say BS, but it's kind of true. And just hit it to you straight, just the facts, no hypes, no hype with any system, and that is the way that I will be with every future storm, because as we know, you can get your information from any type of source, on air, online, TV, and we all know better than anybody that where we get our information is not created equal. Sometimes you get the hype, you get the extra business, they scare you for ratings and all that. I'm not going to do that, because when I went through Irma, I was getting emails from people who were 8 years old, who were 80 years old, and they would tell me, I'm scared. What do I do? What do I do? And I'm even telling you the G-rated comments, like there are people who it was really impacting them. They weren't taking it well because they've never been through a storm before. And I said, hey, hold the phone. First off, stop watching the Weather Channel. Stop watching these networks that are scaring you. I'm not going to do that. I promise you, if you watch our weathercasts, we'll get you through it. And we'll get you through it without the hype, without the scare tactics. Because, and we're going to talk about this throughout the presentation, but that is the difference from a national network, CNN, Weather Channel, Fox News, and then compared to a local station. A local station, my area is you guys, Southwest Florida only. Now, with a national network, they have to cover from coast to coast. You know what I mean? So they don't have a commitment to you guys like I do. That's the big difference, and that is the big difference from local news to national news. All right, let's get the presentation started. So I mentioned it a second ago, in order to talk about the future, we got to talk about the past. Who was here during Hurricane Irma? Now, how did everybody do overall during Hurricane Irma? What was your experience? Was it what you expected? Was it better than you expected? Was it worse than you expected? What do you guys think?
I thought it was a lot better
Right.
than the news said, and I'm noticing that the storm surge prediction isn't quite as
Yeah.
accurate, and
Yeah.
that worries me from a boy who cried wolf standpoint, that we're not
Yeah.
going to pay attention.
Well, I'm glad she brought that up. You're exactly right. So she was saying that Irma was not as bad as what the media was saying. The storm surge wasn't as bad.
Went east.
What's that?
It went east.
And he's right. So that is what was different. Okay? So, and actually I have a storm surge visual I'm going to show you here in a second, but technically she's right. The storm surge wasn't as bad, and the system as a whole wasn't bad for our most populated areas, but we still did have areas that had winds over 100, and we did see 5 to 10 feet of storm surge. It just didn't go right up our coastline that like the computer models originally said. So why is that? At the last minute, Irma shifted 40 miles to the east. When it comes to a landfalling tropical system, every single mile counts. And in this case, it was a big difference. So hypothetically, if the models ended up being correct, and if that system shifted to the west 40 miles, the eye wall, the worst part of the storm and where you have that strongest winds, and the best way to think about wind is a force. So the stronger wind that you have, the stronger force you have, and if that eye wall went 40 miles west, like the models had said about 36 hours out, it would have shoved the strongest wind, the greatest surge, right up Tamiami Trail. 5 to 10 feet. The highest official storm surge I had was about 8 feet. But what actually happened is because the eye wall shifted more to the right, we had a different wind direction. The wind direction was coming in more from the north, at least near the beaches of Collier County and Lee County. But if it went 40 miles west, it would have been the exact opposite. We would have had a south wind with the eye wall shoving that water right up along our coastline. So I want you to keep this in mind with every future tropical system. Every single mile counts. Every single mile. And every single shift and fluctuation. And if you were here with Hurricane Charlie in 2004, we know what a little shift in a last-minute track can do for what we see or what we don't see. So let's talk about Irma. Irma, we did not get at its strongest point. Barbuda, if you can see very closely at this image, they did. Look at that. They fit right in the eye of this monster Category 5, which at its strongest point, the max winds were 180 miles an hour, $77 billion worth of damage, and unfortunately, it killed over 100 people. But with Irma, it wasn't just the sheer power and the max winds upwards of 180 miles an hour. It was a huge storm, massive storm, and I wanted to show you this visual side-by-side comparison. Look at the scope in comparison to Andrew. Now, Andrew, Category 5, we all know what it did to southern Florida, but Irma was different. It was a massive storm, so the scope in which it impacted the state of Florida was gigantic. It was at one point 60 to 75% of the state, and actually at one point it even from north to south went from South Carolina to Cuba, from its northern band to its southern band. So why was it so massive? Well, over its life, and here's its 3,000-mile track, I mean, literally, once it left Africa, it hit the ground running. And it was able to accumulate more tropical moisture, and then it was able to gather more showers and storms. It wrapped it around the core and grew to this Category 5. And where you see the shading of the brightest pink, that's Category 5 strength. And notice how it was a Category 5 for over 2 days, to the extent of what they have never seen in the open Atlantic, at least for that long, of being a Category 5. So this was a very sleep-deprived, pale, and hungry me back on September 10th at 9:08 a.m. By that point, we had Irma making landfall as a Category 4. So again, if you're brand new to Florida and this is your first hurricane season, how it works is you have what's referred to as the Saffir-Simpson scale. It's a 1 to 5 scale. It essentially measures the intensity of these tropical systems. And when it made landfall in the Keys, it was a 4. Then what happened was between Marco Island and the Keys, I don't want to say it was weaker, but it lost a little bit of its kick and it was downgraded to a 3. Now still, it was a major hurricane. It was a Category 3 and it packed quite a punch for Marco Island. But that was, not going to lie, that was a heck of a week. Lost 7 pounds, 3-4 hours of sleep a night. We went wall to wall for about 5-6 days. And when you go wall to wall, it's 12 on, 12 off. We had people sleeping in cots upstairs, and one of them, Lindsay Sablon, my former morning show anchor, she's still there. You can still watch her. She was pregnant. Poor girl was going 12 on, 12 off with the baby kicking in between her segments on TV. So I have no room to complain. Lindsay Sablon was like Superwoman. And actually at that point, she was just a reporter filling in. She earned that job. She actually became the morning show anchor because of her great work during Irma. But also, remember I mentioned the size of Irma? Look at this, going from, and you can't see it on the map, Cuba all the way up. Look at the entire state of Florida, at least the peninsula here hanging down with rain, storms. And if you look very closely, see these individual little pockets of, you see the yellow, orange, and red. Normally, on the eastern side of a tropical system, and that's almost a dead giveaway, you have rotation and waterspouts and tornadoes that are possible. So it's not just the core of it that you need to factor in, but it is also the tornado potential. Hey, let me go back real quick. Okay, so, and let me spread the love over here. Where you see that red donut, that is where you have the strongest winds. And that is where you have the eye wall. That's going to be the worst part of the storm. It's not the eye, but the eye wall that you want to try to avoid. That's where you get tornado-like winds. You see the winds of 100, 120, or, as you saw a second ago, 142 miles an hour. That was the highest official wind gust that we had with Irma. So we brought up this discussion, ma'am, a second ago about how, at least for Bonita, it didn't seem that bad, but it wasn't the case for everybody. And the reason why we had a big range in what people saw was because some saw the eye wall and some didn't. Naples did. And look at what happened. 142 miles an hour for the strongest wind gusts, and this was officially at Naples Airport, and this was damage in Collier County as a result. And we have some who are still trying to get their claims from Irma 3 to 4 years ago. Takes that long, can you believe it? Who are still trying to get their lives back together. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good time, right? Okay, so here are some other wind observations. Naples, there's the 142, Marco Island 130. And folks, these are just official observations. Unofficially, where we didn't have observations that were, first off, in place or didn't get blown away or damaged, you know, there could have very well been higher wind gusts than this, but this is just officially, with an anemometer, what we were able to record. Lely, 122. There's Bonita, 90, but look at the difference. Look at the difference between Bonita at 90 to Naples at 142. Big difference, and that's because Bonita avoided the eye wall. They avoided the worst part of the storm. Now, even if they briefly got clipped by the western side of the eye wall, it's the northeastern quadrant. Okay, so you have the eye wall. It's the northeastern quadrant that's the strongest. And that is where you have those max winds that you oftentimes will see on a tropical weather graphic. That's what you always want to avoid, and that also is what brings the most storm surge.
Why is the strength different going around the circle? Why isn't it the same all the way around?
It has to do, believe it or not, with the rotation of Earth. And so let's flip it. In the southern hemisphere, where do you think the strongest one?
Southwest.
Exactly. So it depends on what hemisphere you are in and the rotation of the Earth.
Thank you.
Okay, we did have storm surge in this area, but because we got lucky and it made that shift 40 miles to the east at the last minute, to piggyback off of the conversation we just had about storm surge, we avoided the worst. Most spots near the coastline had about 3 to 5. 3 to 5. Southern Collier County, they didn't get so lucky. And they were on that east side and the northeastern quadrant of the eye wall. So Everglades City, Plantation Island, then this is one of the pictures from Southern Collier County. They got the surge that the predictions early were showing right up the pike, right up Tamiami Trail. They got it, we did not. But this very well, if this sucker shifted to the west, we could have had images like this for Sanibel, the lighthouse, Fort Myers Beach, the Naples Pier. I cannot stress enough how lucky we got with Irma. Yes, ma'am.
Does that diagram tell us which side you should evacuate?
I'm sorry?
When you think of evacuating, does the diagram help us decide which direction you should evacuate?
Yes, yes. So, and if you haven't done so already, we actually have hurricane guys at Publix, and it will tell you evacuation zones and also where to go. They're free at Publix. You can always get them. For those who are, did you get one?
Well, I got it at Publix, but I saw them coming in out here.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, if they have them, yes, sir.
Talking about storm surge.
Yeah.
Bonita Bay is kind of unique in several ways.
Mm-hmm.
One is we're bordered on the north by Spring Creek, on the south by Imperial River, and on the west side by the bay, Estero Bay. So if it's going to come from the west side, from the beach, let's say,
Yeah.
toward us, and it hits this big Estero Bay, won't that slow some of the volume and surge force down?
Well, really, it's depending on the angle in which it approaches. So hypothetically, your worst case scenario and where we are is if this makes landfall towards Estero Bay, because you are going to get that eastern side and that southern side forcing the water up. Now, in a better situation, again, you're still going to get storm surge regardless, but a better situation would be if, let's say, it made landfall Naples to Marco Island, because then your wind direction is coming from the land. And they're actually, I don't know if you guys saw pictures of this during Irma, you actually have what's referred to as reverse storm surge, where it sucks out the water. And we had people that were like, oh, this is cool. Let me go to Fort Myers Beach at the pier. And they went out 100 feet and 150 feet. I said, hold on, the storm's going to come back. So guess where the water is going to come twice as high? You need to get out of there. Please don't do that. So again, the location of a landfalling tropical system means everything for storm surge, both what piles up, but also what gets sucked out. But yeah, the worst case scenario here would be is if it made landfall around Estero Bay, because then you get that northeastern quadrant and then eventually the southeastern quadrant, and it's going to pile that water up. So that's, yes.
Doesn't Estero Island become a barrier? He said because Estero
Well.
Bay is very shallow.
Well, depending on how high the surge is, that surge can go right over,
Yeah, it's
depending on how strong the storm is.
okay.
Yeah.
But my recommendation hasn't changed. Get the heck out of here.
Yeah. Could everybody do me one favor? Let's try to, and if not, hold all the questions until maybe the end, okay? I'll be more than happy to answer everything that you guys have. So it's not only the saltwater flooding and the storm surge that we would have to potentially worry about. It is also the freshwater flooding, just the heavy rain that is dumped on from a hurricane. Now, of course, when you see this picture, those must be some really nice shoes, right? She just doesn't want to damage it. Goes without saying, I know it's common sense, please don't do this and venture out? Do we know if there are gators, water moccasins, fire ants down, down power lines under the water? We don't know. This,
A drop off that you can't.
yeah, you don't know. You don't know. So this was Buckingham. This lady, again, I don't know what God's name she was doing, 8 to 14 inches of rain. And what you don't see in this image, 2 weeks prior, there was a very heavy rainfall event. So the grounds were already saturated, and it didn't take much, and this additional rainfall led to scenes like this. So that's 2017. Let's fast forward another year. So Michael was an absolute beast. It basically went from a nothing to a something in just a few days. Here's a quick recap. First landfall in Category 5 since Andrew in 1992, and it was a storm that the Florida Panhandle had never seen. They literally have never seen a storm like Michael. It was the third most intense landfall in the U.S. on record, and it was actually strengthening up until landfall. It wasn't until boom and hit land that finally it started to weaken. So you could even make the argument that if it had more real estate and had more time over the water, it could have been an even stronger storm. It basically just ran out of time. Max winds were 160 miles an hour, and the damage was 25 billion. Here is my most important graphic out of the entire PowerPoint, and I want everybody to really soak this one in. This is why you have been very kind enough to invite me here today, and why I want to prep you for storms, because of Michael. The reason why Michael is such a case and such an example to get your plans early. Can everybody see that bottom line on the bottom of the graphic? It went from a tropical depression to a landfall in Category 5 in 3 days. So here's the timeline. October 7th, showers and storms eventually developed into a tropical depression. October 7th. October 10th, landfall as a Category 5. How can you prep for that? How could you prep for it at the last minute? You can't. You can't. But if you prep early, and when it's sunny, like it is today, then you're ahead of the game. You know what you're going to do. You know where to evacuate if you do. You have disaster supplies, and you're good to go. And that is always the common recommendation, is you want to prepare for these storms when it's sunny and when it's nice, and not at the last minute because of examples like Michael. A nothing to a something in 3 days. Here's what it did. Here's the power of storm surge. And again, I don't think that Irma was going to have storm surge values like Michael, but I want to show you this example for what the power of storm surge can do. Storm surge is the worst part of a hurricane. It's the most destructive. It's the most deadly. So let me show you Michael. So Michael was a landfall in Category 5. It's pretty much as bad as it gets. This was before the storm. Here's after.
Looks like World War II.
Right. And cannot stress this enough, folks. If you are told to evacuate, evacuate. Okay? And that is because there have been estimates that the storm surge values could potentially hit 5, 10, or whatever values you are told, and I will give you those values on TV. But what it's done is it's done by a model that takes the forward motion, the strength of the storm, the size of the storm, puts everything together, and then makes those predictions. But again, those predictions are done based off of how the storm currently is. If this thing gets stronger, then the values go up. If it gets weaker, then obviously the values go down. And I'm so glad that you brought up the storm surge of Irma. No, early on, I'm glad you did, because trust me, you are person 548 who's brought up Irma storm surge with me, so I'm glad you did. It was an excellent example, excellent. Okay, and I want you to keep this in mind when you see those storm surge projections with future storms. And my job with being on TV is I relay the information from the government and from the National Hurricane Center. They create these storm surge predictions, and then I will relay them for you on air. We want to be a unified message, and every single TV station will have the same thing. Our job as a broadcaster is to broadcast, especially in natural disasters, emergency information. Now, Think about it. If you are in the government or in broadcast TV, hypothetically, would you want to over-prepare someone or under-prepare someone? Over-prepare, just in case. So the reason why I want to bring that up, in most cases, when you see storm surge projections, 9 times out of 10, those are worst case scenario projections. Could it happen? Yeah. You know what's a great example? Have you guys ever gone to the gas station, you get like a scratch off? Could you win? Yes. Do you win? No. Not every time. You win like what, 1 out of 5? But same thing with those storm surge projections. Could it happen? Absolutely. Will it happen most of the time with those max values? No. Now, it's not to say you're not going to get any storm surge, but the odds of hitting those maximum values are low, but they're not impossible. And what happens is the government would rather, and the National Hurricane Center would rather over-prepare you than under-prepare you, because literally lives are at stake. And you almost got to put yourselves in their shoes. And then myself as chief at Wink, we want to over-prepare you than under-prepare you. Because guess what happens if we under-prepare you? Well, you guys said it was going to be 2 feet and it was 6 feet. I lost my house. What the heck? So trust me, we get it all. So you see what I'm saying? I would rather over-prepare you than under-prepare you. So that way, let's say you keep your home instead of losing it when you didn't expect it. I can live with that. That I over-prepared you instead of under-prepared you, and you were blown away with how strong the storm was. So this is what Michael did in 2018. How high was the storm surge? 19 feet. I'm 6'3". It was 3 of me. 19 feet. Can you imagine that? Coming in from the Gulf? 19 feet. You'll notice some other high water marks. Here's a 17, 15, 17.5. And to go off of what we were saying before, wind is a force. So if you have a max wind of 160 miles an hour, you have Category 5 force bringing up that water, in this case, 19 feet. So let's go forward a year. Dorian. Oh, this takes the cake for the most annoying storm I think I've ever had to deal with. Do you remember this is the one that slowed down, and oh my goodness. Now, we got lucky with this storm. It eventually made the turn to the north. The Bahamas, they did not get lucky. I have never seen a natural disaster like this impact the Bahamas. It's bad enough to deal with a Category 5, and this was the most powerful hurricane on record in the open Atlantic. But to deal with a Category 5 for 24 hours straight, I've never seen a Category 5 do that, where it just slows down, stalls out, and doesn't move with relentless wind, rain, storm surge for an entire day. When you normally deal with a landfalling hurricane, and at least the eye wall, you get it for about, the eye wall, the worst part of the storm, 1 to 3 hours. Some cases, they had to deal with it throughout most of a day. And it was terrible. It was the worst natural disaster that they've ever seen in the Bahamas. And still to this day, they are cleaning up from 2 years ago. So now let's go another year, last year. Okay, so a recap of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. It was the most active that we've ever had. 11 U.S. landfalls, 5th costliest, $51 billion worth of damage. And I actually had to update this graphic just last night. Iota, after a postseason recap, it was a Category 5. They downgraded it to a 4. Tomato, it's, the statistics, whatever. But it actually was the first year now that we have not had a Category 5 since 2015. But still, we had a lot of storms. Most active season on record. Why? I want everybody to look at the bottom right-hand portion of the screen. La Nina was at moderate to even at times high levels during the 2020 season. What the heck is La Nina? Well, La Nina, it's a cooler than normal water trend in the Eastern Pacific. Well, is with the Pacific. How does that alter, how does that impact us? So what happens is when you have cooler than normal waters in the eastern Pacific, it alters weather patterns up in the atmosphere. Then it starts to correlate into the Atlantic. And when you have a La Nina, you have less shear over the Atlantic. Okay, so again, if this is your first hurricane season, less shear, we don't like that. That allows for us to not only have stronger storms, but to have more of them. So if La Nina is associated with less shear, more storms, and stronger storms, guess what La Nina's brother, El Nino, has? The exact opposite. We like El Nino. We like the brother better. El Nino has more shear, and that helps to weaken tropical systems and also, in many cases, not have as many of them. So, in a nutshell, La Nina, we don't like that one. We like El Nino because it increases the wind shear. And here's essentially, I know this is a very get-it-done version, but let's say you have the core of the storm. If you have greater wind shear, it displaces the showers and storms away from the center. But if you have lower wind shear, the showers and storms are able to get closer to the core, it wraps around the eye, and you're able to have a stronger and more intense storm. But if you have greater wind shear, it keeps them disorganized because it blows literally the storms away from the center. That's what we had last year. We had a lower shear year. These are all the storms. It looks like a bowl of spaghetti, especially in the Gulf. Was anybody here in Florida in 2004 when we got the onslaught of one storm after another? Well, that was essentially Louisiana last year. They got hit with Laura, with Zeta, the list goes on. They were hit left and right. Louisiana had a horrendous year. But in total, 30 storms. We had 14 hurricanes and 7 major hurricanes, and that's Category 3 and above. So what happened was, for a few years, since about 2005 and so on and so forth, we have been using the Greek alphabet if we run out of names. Well, what happened a few months ago is the World Meteorological Organization said this is too confusing. The public they analyzed that the public hasn't been handling this well, so they said the heck with Greek alphabet, we're never going to use it again. So it's done. It's retired. You will never hear the Greek alphabet again, which we got halfway through last year. We got through all the names and halfway through the Greek alphabet. So although last year, I mean, let's be real, we dodged a lot of bullets, And, if you notice some gray and some balding, it's from the 2020 season alone. Joys of getting older. But we didn't completely dodge everything. We got a glancing blow. We'll call it a glancing blow from Eta. And does anybody see the date? That was the most unusual part of it. November 11th, we had Thanksgiving 2 weeks later. And this was Eta. It was a brief Category 1 hurricane. It was about 100 miles off the coast. But let me just show you what this storm did. As a minimal Category 1, no hurricane is minimal. Even if it's a Category 1, it can still have an impact. And this thing stayed 100 miles off the coast. Let me show you what it did. So the picture on the left, that is Matt Lachey to and from. Every now and then, if someone is not properly tying down their boat or taking the necessary precautions, that one got dislodged, went under the bridge. And then who's ever been to Pierside Grill, Fort Myers Beach? That's Pierside Grill, literally right along the pier with huge crashing waves. It also brought some very heavy rainfall. The picture on the left is Fort Myers. She went from having a lawn to now having a lake. And then the picture on the right, we had the highest official wind gust I had was 70 in Port Charlotte. Not too far off, there's a picture from Englewood, and the grounds were too saturated. We had a strong gust of wind and uprooted the massive tree. What's wrong with this picture? Let's see if someone can spot it first. Yes, that's a school bus. Why is there a school bus out during a hurricane? I'll tell you why. And this doesn't leave this room. And also, I mean, online too. Okay, so here's what happened. Collier County and Charlotte County, they were on it. They were tracking the storm. Lee County, not so much. So here's what happened. I don't want to completely throw them under the school bus, but so here's what happened. Charlotte County, as well as Collier County, they were analyzing the storm. They were watching trends. Lee County, that morning, it was just a tropical storm, and it was more to the west. Well, guess what happened? It strengthened, became a hurricane, and also started to trek closer to the coastline. But they had already sent the kids out. So you can imagine their panic level when it became a hurricane and a trend closer to the coast. And then they said, oh my God, we got the kids at school. Let's send them home early. But when they sent them home early, now it's in the middle of the storm. And this was one of the shots of a school bus bringing kids home. Look at this is Sanibel Causeway. Look at the waves on the right-hand portion. So, in a nutshell, I hope this was a wonderful learning experience for the Lee County School District, that please, please, please monitor the weather very closely before a storm. I hope that I never, ever, ever see this again. And all the emails I got from parents, less than please, in very colorful language. Okay, so now, 2021. We have already kicked it off early. So you may have heard this recently in the news. They have been throwing around the idea of potentially bringing up the season to May 15th instead of June 1st. But at the end of the day, that's only officially. Mother Nature could develop these whatever it wants. And for example, Alex in 2016, that was a hurricane in January. It was in no man's land. It was in the open Atlantic, but Mother Nature doesn't say, oh, it's June 1st, let me start these up. Can develop it whatever it wants, but because of this recent trend of 7 years in a row and counting of storms before June 1st, including this year with Anna popped up, didn't do anything, it was in the middle of nowhere, they are throwing around the idea of officially moving up the season. So here's the outlook from NOAA. Came out about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. So in a given year, we average 14 tropical storms, we average 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes, and that's, again, Category 3 and above. So their forecasts, and hey, you can't be wrong when you have a huge range like that, right? But hey, I don't blame them. So their forecast is 13 to 20, so that would classify as an above-average year. They have 6 to 10 in their forecast for hurricanes, and major hurricanes 3 to 5. These are the names for this year. We have Anna, next up is Bill, and I will tell you, I've been very conservative with how I've said it on air, because you need to, with relaying, and this is how I'm always going to be, with relaying your message out to the public, avoid the hype. Take it nice and slow, nice and calm, conservative. I do see some indications for right now, and again, it could change, that there could be Bill in the Gulf over the next 2 weeks. So on air, I talked about it yesterday, but I was very conservative about it. But between you and I, there is the possibility of having Bill in the Gulf late second half of next week and towards Father's Day weekend. So we'll have to see how things go. It's still very early, but as of yesterday, I had the Canadian, European, and American model all showing something in the Gulf. Do I know where it's going to go? No, because anything beyond the 7 to 10 day outlook, computer model accuracy is so low. And to be quite frank with you, I wouldn't know where it's going to go. You have to get it within 7 to 10 days to at least have an idea of where it could go. But at least for right now, there is the possibility of something in the Gulf for the second half of next week. But the good news is you guys will be watching Wink, and I'll have you covered. We'll talk about it. But I didn't mention that on air yesterday because I got to be conservative with the message, and I have to. It's one of those where you start it calmly, and then you gradually will work up to it if the models come into better agreement. That will always be the strategy. You start calm, you start conservative, and then if those models come together, then you start to open up the possibility. So these are the names. Then, if we go through all the names, now this is essentially the new Greek alphabet, we have the supplemental list of names. These are basically the backups, where if we go through the entire list, then we tap into this. These are the new names. Okay, real quick, I'm going to go back to this. So here's the forecast for this year. What do you guys think? Now, if I had $1 for every single time I've heard this, I would be a rich man and I could probably retire from the emails that I always get from people. And the common quote is, you guys say every year it's going to be an active season. Every single year you say the same thing. And I say, well, every single year recently has been active, so it's been right. But even if, hypothetically, this is correct, and we see 13 to 20 storms, that doesn't mean they're all coming here. And, you just got to take all these predictions with a grain of salt. Because at the end of the day, all it takes is one storm to make all the difference. And what I normally will tell people is, I'll be asked the question, do you put a lot of weight in these forecasts? And to be honest with you, I don't. Because it just takes one storm. That's it. Doesn't matter if they're painting 10, 20, 30. It just takes one storm to make a lasting impact. So let me show you some examples. Okay? And this will come into 2010 was an above average year. It was an active year. Guess where they all went? They went out to sea. So we did verify and have 19 storms, and it was an above average year. All the powerful storms, that's in the purple shading, the pinkish shading that you see. Look where they all went. They curved out to sea. Okay, so I don't want you guys to be nervous and scared when you hear that projection that it's going to be an above average season. That doesn't mean that they're all targeting Southwest Florida, and you can have a chunk of them that curve out to sea. How about the flip side? 1992, that was a below average year. We only had 7 storms. We only had one major hurricane. Guess who the major hurricane was? Now, you ask anybody in southern Florida, do you think that they would say that that was a below average year? Absolutely not. So you see the message here, folks? I don't care if the projections are below average, above average. It takes one storm. That's it. Okay? And in 1992, Hurricane Andrew literally changed the face of southern Florida. And one storm is all it takes. So again, because I get a lot of people that will get nervous when they hear those projections. And I said, hey, don't get nervous. Don't get nervous. A lot can change. And it doesn't mean that all these storms are going to be targeting Florida. Some do, in even below average seasons. But then you can have other years, like in 2010, where they all curve out to sea. So every single year is different. Okay, so that is the before in prepping you guys for a storm. Now, hypothetically, let's say that we do have a storm that's heading our way. I'll see if I can work my magic and try to blow them away. I'll see if I have some powers there. But if we hypothetically have a storm coming our way, here's how you prep, here's how you plan. So first, if all those spaghetti plots are trending towards our area, then we would be under a hurricane watch. And that means that hurricane conditions are possible within 48 hours. Now, if those computer models continue to trend closer to our area, then we would be under a hurricane warning, and that means conditions are expected within the next 36 hours. So then you would want to determine your risk. Are you in a storm surge zone? Would you be impacted by strong winds? And what you essentially would want to do is look at your property. Do you have large trees that would be susceptible to snapping in half, being uprooted, and then the wind pushing it onto your home? So assess your property. What will a 100-mile-an-hour wind do to where you live? Okay, the nature of tropical systems, because you have an enhanced wind field up in the atmosphere, you have twist and you have spin, and tornadoes, it's just the nature of how the earth works. Tornadoes would be possible. Now, I will tell you, during Irma, we had a freakishly low amount of tornadoes. We actually only officially had one in our area. Crazy, right? But I've had other tropical systems like Ivan. Ivan was in the northern Gulf Coast back in 2004. That had over 100 tornadoes. So it depends on the season. You also want to assess inland flooding. Okay, inland flooding is a big dynamic. It's not only the saltwater flooding, but inland flooding. You saw the one picture of the lady with the nice shoes in Buckingham. So we need to assess that. And then Technically, Noah wanted to give you a heads up on this one. If you're swimming out in a hurricane, that's the least of your concerns here. I think there's some other things that you'll need to assess. Okay. Here's also a big critical part of the presentation that happened during Irma. When you are asked to evacuate, it's because you are susceptible to storm surge and potentially life-threatening storm surge. In that case, you would be issued under a mandatory evacuation and you will be asked to leave. Now, despite the mandatory evacuations, we always have some that say, it's not going to be too bad, a storm surge, not a big deal. I'm just going to hunker down and I'm going to be fine. And you can. But what happens in a mandatory evacuation is if you decide to do that, if you call 911, they're not coming for you. You are on your own. You are on your own. And the plan is that why they do that and why they say you're on your own is because if something happens to you and they need to send out the first responders, then you are sacrificing and putting at jeopardy the lives of the first responders who are coming out to help you. So, and they just feel that there's too much risk. So, in a nutshell, if you decide to stay during a mandatory evacuation, you're on your own until after the storm where they can try to help you out if you need help. It's a risk, it's a gamble, and it's a gamble that I would not recommend. If you are told to evacuate, you need to evacuate. And I will be the first to relay that message on Wink if you have to evacuate. But what we had during Irma was almost too many people evacuating. And then after that, the roads were clogged. Then we had the gas shortages. You don't necessarily have to evacuate if you're well inland, okay? So, for example, I've done hurricane talks at Ave Maria, Babcock Ranch, where they don't really have to evacuate. They're well inland, they have great constructed homes, new material, the latest building codes. They don't necessarily have to evacuate, and they can hunker down. One of the reasons why they may want to evacuate is the possibility of losing power for 2 to 3 weeks, and then life is not very enjoyable. But they would have to keep in mind that they are clogging the roads potentially for people who live on Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, who literally need to evacuate. They are leading to that congestion and also taking away gas for these people who literally, they have no choice. They need to evacuate. You see what I mean? And that is one of the biggest misconceptions with hurricanes. You can literally evacuate. You don't have to leave the area. You can evacuate to inland spots, but as long as you get away from the water. You got to get away from the storm surge because of visuals, like remember the one with Hurricane Michael? We evacuate to get away from the water, not to get away from the wind, but to get away from the water, especially if storm surge hits 19 feet like it did with Michael. So that is one of the biggest misconceptions. But if you feel that you, and depending on where you guys are, if you feel, and it's a judgment call on every single one of your ends, if you think that storm surge is going to be life-threatening, and first off, if you're told to evacuate, you need to evacuate, but, you have to make a decision for your friends and your family. You got to make a judgment call. And as I mentioned before, it's better to over-prepare and overanalyze these storms than to under-prepare and get caught off guard, okay? That's just my advice when it comes to evacuating. But find out if you live in an evacuation zone, you do, and then plan several routes, have a go bag for supplies, plan for your pets, and follow evacuation orders. If given, I will give you those evacuation orders. Get an insurance checkup. You can check with your agent, keep documents with you, know your policy, and consider flood insurance. Strengthen your home. You can cover windows. There are normally 3 options here for protecting your windows. A, hurricane-resistant windows. You have also the storm shutters that you can put on. My parents have that on the east coast of Florida. Or, of course, to get it done, plywood, nail it in, good to go. But again, that doesn't completely protect your windows, but it's the lesser of the 2 evils. Secure loose outdoor items because they can serve as flying projectiles, especially if you have winds over 100 miles an hour. Think about that wind forcing it. Remember we talked about wind being a force? It would force it into God knows where in your house or toward your house. Trim trees that you know could be troublemakers. small, medium-sized limbs that could break off and then go towards your house. Move your vehicle to a safe location. What you could do is you park your car in the garage and then you back it up right to the door. What that can at least try to prevent, it's not bulletproof, but what it can try to prevent is the wind punching in the garage door. I've seen that happen on many occasions. And then secure all your doors. Anybody have a pool cage? You guys have a pool cage? Okay. Here are just some friendly reminders, and these I've done these hurricane talks. And we have some real pool experts that want to take it to another level. These are just the basics. You are more than welcome to take it to that extra level if you want. Power down equipment at the circuit breaker. Keep the pool filled. Sometimes when you get heavy rain situations with tropical systems, the soil gets what's the best way to explain it? Gets very unsettled. And there are times, and I've seen this not only in Florida, but other parts of the country during flooding situations, the pool can actually come out of the ground because of very heavy rain. But if you fill it and you keep that pool filled, all the weight will try to at least bring it down as much as possible. Don't cover your pool. Add chlorine to the pool as a chemical defense because we know that there's going to be tons of debris, God knows what, going into the pool during and after the storm. Place the outdoor furniture in the pool if you can't put it either inside or in the garage. If you put it in the pool, you put it in the water, that's at least a nice backup if you're not able to put it elsewhere. And then here's a quick getter done. What I had with Irma was a lot of people at Cape Coral who, what was happening is they were cutting every single net in the pool cage, but then it turns out that their pool cage was fine, so now they just had to replace all the screens when they didn't have to in the first place. If you're going to lose your cage, you're going to lose your cage. But what I would recommend, it lowers the probability a notch, is to take the doors off of the cage. That will reduce the strain and will reduce the pressure. Basically, it'll lower the probability of losing your cage from like 80% to maybe 50 or 60%. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But it's at least a possibility that lowers the odds. You see what I mean? So taking off the cage doors does lower the probability a little of keeping your cage. Okay, assemble disaster supplies, and these are just the normal basics. Food and water, medicine, prescriptions. You want to keep your gas tank full because as we know, during natural disasters, gas is like gold. And also as of like two months ago, it was also like gold. Very interesting situation there. Radio, batteries, phone chargers, and we don't always know if where you're going has power for credit cards, so make sure to always have cash on hand. So you don't have to do this next graphic, but these are hurricane hacks if you come across a situation where you may need to do these. And people have had some free time on their hands where they've experimented and it's worked. Again, you don't have to do this, but these are hurricane hacks. Store water in your tub. You have usable water. Put it in the tub. Why not? You could use that for number 10 while you're maybe going number 2. I'm kidding. You pour 2 gallons in the toilet bowl to flush. When you put 2 gallons in the bowl, it activates the flush. But you can use that water from what you've compiled in the tub. So see what I mean? It's using kind of some hacks here to get through a natural disaster. Here's a good one. You take Ziploc bags full of water and you put it in the freezer. So what you do in this case, you take a Ziploc bag with fresh water before the storm, you fill that Ziploc bag 3/4 of the way. If you do it too much, the pressure when it freezes would cause it to kind of expand and explode the bag. So what you want to do, 3/4 of the Ziploc bag, and this actually has 2 uses for it. First off, if the temperature in the freezer gets above freezing and the ice melts, you get drinkable water after the fact. And then second, when you have all that ice in the Ziploc bags, it almost serves as like an ice pack, and it will keep your freezer colder longer. So you get drinkable water, and it keeps your freezer colder longer. This is great for hurricane parties. To each his own. Again, you don't have to do this, but I've seen it done. You can fill your washer with ice, and then once it gets above freezing, it'll just drain. The water just drains. Put possessions in the dishwasher, but make sure that the dishwasher is off before you do it. That's the asterisk to this one. if you don't feel comfortable putting in your dishwasher, you can put your possessions above the cabinets in the kitchen. We know it's about 8-9 feet. And the reason why we would want to do this is if your place floods and if you're hunkering down, we either want to get it as high as possible, or, what do dishwashers do? They keep the water in, but they also can keep the water out. So what you would do is you would put your valuables in a plastic Ziploc bag, okay? And maybe you may have some extras from number 2. What you would do is you would put your valuables in there, put it in the dishwasher, turn the water off, and then that would help to protect your valuables and important documents in the dishwasher. If there is flooding in your place, you put it in there, you lock it, and it's sealed. Your family would definitely appreciate this one before. Make sure to shower, do laundry, and lower the AC as low as possible before the storm. Because first off, we don't know the next time that we're going to be able to shower, especially if you're without power. And Benita was out without power for 2 weeks with Irma. So we don't know the next time we're going to have power. And so if you shower beforehand, you do your laundry, and if you lower your AC before the storm, we're able to capture that cold air as long as possible if you run out of power and your house starts to heat up. So it prolongs you having some cool air. Now, it's not going to be there at the end of 2 weeks or a week, but again, you'll at least have it for a longer period. Here's a free lantern. You put light to a gallon of water and you'll get an extra glow. Who has a dog? Anybody have a dog? Fido will never forgive you if you put them out during a hurricane and they try to do their business. So pieces of sod in the garage, you could just put it on the floor, but I've seen some examples where you put it in a kiddie pool and then they just kind of do their thing there. So pieces of sod in the garage for the dog. Who's ever heard of the penny cup trick? Okay, so here's the logic with the penny cup trick. And the reason why we do this is to test spoilage in the freezer. Okay, so what you do is, before the storm, you fill up a cup of water, you put it in the freezer, then the water freezes. And then after that happens, you put a penny on the top. Well, hypothetically, if you lose power and in the freezer it starts to get above freezing, the ice will melt, penny sinks to the bottom, and then you know that what you have in the freezer has potentially spoiled. So that's the penny cup trick. I've actually tested this next one, and it does work, believe it or not. If you're ever out of AA batteries, what you can do, and let's say you have AAA, you take some tin foil, you wrap it up into a ball, and the distance, so we know that AAA is smaller than AA, you would put the tin foil in the space, where you put the batteries in, you put the tin foil in the space between, and it actually works and can charge whatever you want to use. Maybe it's the TV remote, you never know. I wouldn't put that high on the disaster supplies list, but it actually can work, the AAA tinfoil combo. Okay, next one. Here's some examples of people's creativity. So we have on the right, or excuse me, on the left, we have the dishwasher. And then the one that everybody always loves, it's not the Ritz, and I wouldn't say it's, you're not going to be, that's a pool noodle and a bucket, but hey, it's a natural disaster. You got to get it done, But I've actually seen examples of people doing that. Again, to each his own, whatever you want to do. Okay, so it's 2021. Most people have a phone, but during a natural disaster, we want to make sure that phone has the maximum amount of power because you never know when you're going to need it. So let's conserve that power. Keep it in low power mode, dim the screen, turn off Bluetooth. You want to close unnecessary apps and avoid games. If we have a hurricane heading to my mom, I have to tell her, words with friends, we cannot be using that during a hurricane. She is on that app more than ever. So, Mom, no words with friends. And then, okay, so those are the top 4. The next one, don't do this during the storm. This is more so after because of carbon monoxide poisoning. You don't want to use your charger in the car when it's in the garage. We want to have the car in open air Okay, we want to have the car in open air, away from the home, then get the car going, and then charge your phone there. That's the mistake that a lot of people make. So this is mainly for after the storm. A laptop is a battery, so you can actually mooch off of your laptop battery if you need an additional charge. This situation is where, let's say you're in a room where all the electrical outlets are being used up, and you need another one while we still have power. Okay, nowadays, new TVs, and I literally just bought a TV like 3 days ago, and sure enough it has this, have the USB ports and the sockets where you can literally use your phone, the USB charger, put it into the TV, and it actually can charge your phone. But again, that's only a last case resort if all the electrical outlets are used up where you are and you need another one for convenience. You can take your TV while it still has power and hook it up to your phone. But oftentimes it's the smart TVs, it's the ones that are newer where you can do that. You also can buy external solar and crank chargers if you need that additional charge as well. Okay, and then I would love your support. My number one recommendation during a storm is watch Wink for updates on air and online. And I did talk about this about a half hour ago when we started the presentation, but I really want to drive this home because I had a lot of this during Irma, where people were watching national outlets where they were scaring people and they were hyping it. And then I would hear about that. I'm like, why are they doing that? I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm trying to get people the information. And then I would get emails like, well, the Weather Channel said this and I'm scared. What do? I feel like I got to leave. And I said, well, stop watching them. They're scaring you. Don't do that. Yeah, I met Jim Cantore. He's actually a very nice guy. But during a natural disaster, please watch Wink, because what I will do, and it's not my first rodeo, I've been through a lot of these, and it's almost like a baseball game. I know first inning through ninth inning how they work. Step in, step out, all the way, from the outer bands to the eye wall, and then the lingering outer bands, and then you're done. And through this process, through the first inning through the ninth, I will guide you through it. It'll be calm, collected, without the hype, without the extra business, and that is my promise to you guys. Because, let's be real, we're going through enough with a natural disaster. We don't need all the extra business. And that is my promise to you guys. If you watch Wink, it will be to the point, no BS, and it will be exactly what you know and exactly what you need to know. Okay? That will always be my promise to you guys. So the other part of a storm, it's not just the physical storm itself, but it is also the psychological toll. Anxiety levels go up. Am I going to keep my house? How am I going to do? So my job as a meteorologist is to help you out with the psychological part. Oftentimes when people get nervous and when they get scared of tropical systems, it's the unknown. What type of wind am I going to see? What type of surge? My job is I want to fill in the holes, tell you what you are going to see, what you're going to expect, and through that, hopefully you become less stressed, less nervous, you can prepare for it, you're good to go, and also guide you through it. Find ways to psychologically get yourself through this storm and keeping the anxiety levels low. But you guys can also do that yourself. Entertain yourself. And what you can do is put on your favorite movie while also still watching Wink on the side. Now, I also want to be realistic with you. I do not expect you guys to watch 2 days straight of hurricane coverage. It's not healthy. You have to find that balance. And I'm even telling you, you'll go crazy if you watch 2 days straight of hurricane coverage. But what I want you to do is get your updates, but every now and then, try to get yourself through it psychologically, okay? And you have that distraction. So you would want to put on your favorite movie, favorite music, board games. Notice how I didn't say phone games, board games, because we want to conserve the power. And then food. Make your favorite food. And if you have extras, I would love to have those too. So you see what I mean? You want to keep your mind occupied during a natural disaster. Yeah?
We're used to that with COVID.
Yeah, I know. Oh, me too. My wife is actually still working from home. Yeah. So yeah, if we ever have a natural disaster, for her it'll be a piece of cake. But What I also would recommend is during the worst part of a hurricane, the eye and the eye wall, you want to treat it like a tornado because you literally could see tornado-like winds. Well, what do we do during a tornado? We go to the lowest level of our home. We get away from windows because we don't know what type of flying projectiles may go through the windows. And then you also want to go to the bathroom or the closet. Now, I don't expect you to do this for the entire duration of a hurricane. I don't want you to be in the bathroom. And again, that's another thing where you might go crazy. I don't want you to do that. It's only when the eye wall is passing by. That's the worst part of the storm. That is when I would want you to hunker down, get away from windows, go to the center of the home, away from windows, and that is the timing that I would recommend. Okay? Now before and after, you can walk around your home, but it's the eye wall. That's what we need to treat the most seriously. Nowadays in 2021, please don't use candles. Let's say that a window gets punctured in, you lose your window, then the wind is coming in, blows over a candle, and then now you have a fire threat. So candles, please, please, please don't use candles. Just too many wild cards, too many threats and dangers. And then do we have any former baseball players or someone who did construction? Two most important parts of your body, your heart and your brain, let's try to protect it. So if you have a helmet, only during the eye wall, I would recommend putting that on. Hey, look at that. Watch Wink for updates. That's my number one recommendation. It's almost like I planned it. And you can also do it on air and online. So hypothetically, if you evacuate, you can still stream Wink from Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, wherever you evacuate. During Irma, we had, was it 2.7 million were streaming? And a lot of it was people who had evacuated. I even had some in Nashville who evacuated and had a hell of a time. But in between having a great time, they were able to check on the status of their home to see how it was doing. Okay, so watch Wink for updates. If evacuating, return home when told to do so. I know the first thing that you want to do after a storm is, I want to get back. I want to see how I'm doing. But we also don't know if where you are at still has power. So let's say you come home prematurely and you don't have power. Now you're almost unnecessarily inviting dynamics here and being without power for 2 weeks that you wouldn't have had if you just stayed where you were evacuating. You see what I mean? You want to head back when you are told to do so, when it's safe, and also when there still is power. Oh boy, this one, I remember this one. This one broke my heart in 2017 when we had, do you guys remember the story? It was during Irma. We had a family, and sure enough, it was Bonita, where they had their generator. It was either in their garage or in their home. They had you remember that story? And what happened was they didn't want it to be stolen. They didn't want I guess it was like a hot commodity in the area, and they didn't want it to be stolen. So they put it in the garage, and they put it in their home, and they got carbon monoxide poisoning, and the entire family died. So, and of course that kills me because, you think, well, did they not watch Wink or get did they not get that generator, safety information beforehand? But for you guys, and please relay the message, never, ever, ever, ever put a generator inside your home or in the garage or even close to where you live. The safe distance oftentimes is 15 to 20 feet, but you also want to factor in where the fumes are going. So what I would recommend is we normally use the generator after a storm, okay? And then after a storm, when the hurricane passes by, you have a southerly component to the wind. So my recommendation is you want to put, and you assess your property, you want to put the generator on the north side of your property because that south wind will blow the fumes to the north and away. Now, you also want to factor in your neighbors. You don't want to blow the fumes towards your neighbors. They'll hate you and never forgive you for it. So again, I would put it on the northern side of the property because that south wind will carry away the fumes. You want to check your refrigerator for spoilage. Don't drink the tap water or make food with it. You could be under a boil water notice. If you are, we will tell you that on Wink immediately. That as well. For those who are streaming right now, he was saying you also want to have a carbon monoxide meter and way to analyze it on a generator. Yeah, very, very smart. Yep. Let's see, don't drink or make food with tap water. Stay out of the building if you smell gas. Save phone calls for emergencies. Avoid venturing out in floodwaters like Mrs. Nice Shoes did in Buckingham. And then take pictures and document any damage. And stay cool if the power is out. That's the hardest thing. During Irma, after the storm, we had a heat index of 100. And I had people's homes. What was the highest I saw? It was like 92 degrees inside the home. So during the afternoon. So the longest without power during Irma, I think it was in Lehigh Acres, and it was 3 weeks. Bonita was about 10 to 14 days. Some got lucky. Like if you are on the same wiring as a what they refer to as a higher importance, like a hospital or first responders, exactly. You will get power back first compared to others. 2 days. And I had others in Bonita. It was 2 weeks. So a lot of it is luck if you're on the same grid as a first responder or hospital. You see what I mean? So it depends. That's it. I hope that was very helpful. And now I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
I know you're not supposed to drink tap water or whatever, but what if you have reverse osmosis with this?
That's okay. So the question, if you're streaming right now online, is what is it okay to drink if you have reverse osmosis? I'm one of those where I would always prepare just in case. Wouldn't hurt to boil the water just in case. You can do that, but boil it just in case. I don't think it hurts to. Don't take any chances, especially with your health. Do that, but also boil it after, just in case. Could you be okay with after that? Yeah, but especially with your health, I would want you to prepare just in case and boil it, as a backup.
You could boil it and freeze it.
Yeah. Yes.
I live in a high-rise on the 24th floor. Are there different precautions I should take?
Oh, so he brought up a very, very good point. Okay, and I'm on the 19th floor, so I'm with you. So what do you do if you're on a high-rise? So how it oftentimes works is, and there have been studies, I forget if it's 10 stories or 30 stories, I'll have to do some homework on it again, but that X amount of stories that you go up, it's like going up a category in strength with a hurricane. Because what happens is when you go up in the atmosphere, winds increase. So the winds are not going to be the same on level 1 compared to level, you said 24? Yeah, so literally for you, your wind speeds are going to be significantly higher than down near the ground. And I know in a perfect situation, it'd be nice, to have a friend on the first floor, you hunker down with them. But as with any storm, and even with a tornado, you got to get as low as possible. So, if you have hurricane force windows, and do you where you live? Yeah, that's absolutely a nice start. Absolutely a nice start. But the problem is, the higher that you get up, the stronger your winds are going to be. And I would just recommend getting as low as you possibly can in a situation like that. And then the other thing is, if you lose power, can you imagine going up and down, 24 flights? And so, granted, I'm in a unique case where, yes?
One of the pages in here talked about 10 stories.
Yeah. Oh, 10 stories? I knew it was 10. It was either 10 or 30. So, okay, so every 10 stories you go up, it's a category. So what I would recommend in your case, and I have, my wife and I will live right across the street from Wink. In that case, I'm going to bring her down because there are too many variables. The wind is too strong that high up to take a chance. Now, you also don't want to be in a case where you are in a flood-prone area or susceptible to storm surge, because then if you go too low, then you got to worry about storm surge. So it's almost, you have to make your best judgment call in a situation like that. But I would just please in a situation like that or in a tornado, get to the lowest level possible, because the winds are at least going to be a category or potentially two lower than what you would have on the 24th floor. And then you also want to factor in if the power's out, you know, you're without power on the 24th floor, and then you'd have to walk up and down, up and down, up and down. Yeah?
I don't have a question, but I remember seeing backing the car to the garage
Yeah.
door.
Yeah.
It works if you have air coming in, stuffed blankets and stuff, but it does work. My garage
Yeah.
door did not move.
Yeah.
And I also suggest not having a lot of food in your freezer.
You having what?
Not having a lot of food in your freezer.
Or
because
you
then
can,
won't use it.
or you can eat it right like leading up to the storm, and you know, you may gain some extra lbs, but you know. Hey, while I still have everybody, don't be mad. It's a shameless plug. I gotta at least do it. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then I have new hours with going from mornings now to evenings. I would love your support. I'm at 5, 6, and 11 p.m. And I promise you, I will guide you through our good weather days, our bad weather days. And it goes back to how we started the presentation. My commitment and my job, it's every single person in this room. It's Southwest Florida. It's not across the entire country. It is this area specifically. And that is what I will always do, 5, 6, and 11. So I had to do that real quick. If you have any more, you guys have any more questions? Yes.
Just a comment. We evacuated for the last storm, and one of the things that turned out really good for us, we went to Orlando where we could catch a flight. And we used Google Maps, and they gave us the instructions on how to go there on 2-lane roads because the interstates are absolutely plugged solid. So Google Maps is a good idea.
I do like Google Maps. They're a wonderful tool. Yeah.
It really saved us probably 2 hours.
Yeah. Yes.
We came back after Irma, and they don't want everybody coming back at once. Everybody
Yeah.
up north, and they're worried about their property, and they all want to rush back to check their property. And the problem is the sewage treatment plant, lack of electricity, and pumping water back and forth.
Yeah. It's too much at one time.
Too much at one time, and the land here is very level.